What is up, guys? My name is Theo, and today we are learning how to shoot smoother handheld video from multiple tutorials from some of the best filmmakers slash YouTubers out there. So stick around. Alright, now that whole sequence you just saw was entirely shot handheld. No gimbals, no sliders, no steadicams, no nothing. Just hands and feet. That's all I used, with the exception of one thing, and I'll explain what that was in just a second. But first, real quick, for those of you guys who do not know me, again, my name is Theo, and I shoot a lot of photo and video content just like this here on this channel. I am also a Fujifilm shooter as well, so if any of that interests you guys, definitely stick around and hit that subscribe button. I do have a lot of stuff coming here in the very near future, so definitely stick around. And secondly, I'm super excited to really get this series started. This series is kind of like 2 years in the making. I know that sounds ridiculous. The main reasons for that is just procrastination, excuses, and a whole bunch of other stuff that I won't get into, but this is something I have been wanting to start for quite some time now. I did shoot like an intro, like trailer type video for this series like almost 2 years ago, but just again, super excited to finally get this started. So this is episode 1, and for this particular episode, I was mainly going to focus on Jesse Driftwood's version of how to shoot smoother handheld video, mainly because of one of the things that he said that I thought was super underrated, that works better than what other people recommend. But as I was coming up with all the examples for this video, I realized I was using other tips from other tutorials from the YouTubers that kind of alongside of what he was teaching in his video. So with this episode, I decided to kind of take the one big thing from each person's tutorial and kind of mash them up into one episode, instead of just focusing on one person's tutorial like I normally would for the other episodes that I plan on doing in the future. Now, that's not to say that the other tips in his videos were not super useful. They're definitely important. I definitely recommend you guys watching their tutorials so you guys can kind of get the bigger picture, but for this video in particular, I just want to focus on those one big things that each person's saying, because each person had one thing that I found the most useful, and that's what I'm going to talk about today in this video. Otherwise, this video would go on forever and be like a 20-minute video, and I definitely don't want that at all. So with that said, getting into the equipment that I used, so as far as the camera, I did use my Fujifilm X-T20. The main reason for using that instead of my X-H1 is the X-T20 doesn't have iris. The lens that I used was the 18-55 kit lens. Main reason for using that one is because you can switch off the OIS in that lens. And the reason for picking this setup was just because I didn't want any kind of physical help as far as stabilizing these shots. I really wanted to try and focus on these tips from these tutorials from these filmmakers to really see just how effective they are, and if you can really get away with using no stabilization whatsoever, besides that one thing that I was talking about earlier. Now, that one thing that I will be using is digital stabilization, stabilizing in post. So whether if you're using Premiere and you're using Warp Stabilizer or Final Cut Pro, like each editor kind of calls it something different. I personally use DaVinci Resolve, and the digital stabilization in DaVinci Resolve is really good, but also DaVinci Resolve has a free version that has majority of the features from the studio version just for free. And that's kind of why I decided to only really use digital stabilization in post, because it's something that everyone can get for free if they use DaVinci Resolve, because anyone who has a computer can download and use that free version. And so it's kind of like a budget option for people. Instead of buying like $1,000 gimbal or super expensive slider or whatever, this is something free that anyone can use given that they have a computer. So that's how I kind of justified using digital stabilization in post. So yeah, I just wanted to basically prove that just about anyone can get smooth footage from just using your hands, your feet, and a computer, and that end result being pretty amazing. Now, to prove that point, as you saw in that opening sequence, the footage I got was very deceivingly smooth for talking about only using my hands, and a lot of that has to do with that digital stabilization. That stabilizing in post basically just kind of rounds out those rough edges from your handheld footage to really kind of give you that floaty kind of gimbal-like smoothness. So I wanted to show you what that sequence looked like without digital stabilization. the difference is pretty drastic, right? So now that just goes to show that these tips that these YouTubers are teaching really do work. And if you kind of use that helping hand of stabilizing in post, you can get some amazing results. Now, getting into the tips, I know I've been rambling on for quite a minute there, but tip number one from Jesse Driftwood's video, he explained a different way of walking the way everyone else does in their tutorials. Instead of doing like the ninja walk that everyone kind of explains, that kind of like heel to toe movement, he tells you that you should be walking on the balls of your feet in kind of a very like tiptoe style of walking. And I think that is way more efficient than the ninja walk. I noticed that the ninja walk, even though you're walking smoother than you normally would, just walking normally in general, you still kind of get that shock, that kind of vibration for when your heel touches the ground. Now, in the shots that I got doing the ninja walk, I did get like that split second of like blurry motion from the sensor shake or vibration that I got from putting my heel down on the ground. I don't know if I was necessarily just doing it wrong. Now, I do find Jesse's like tiptoe way a lot easier to get away with, as well as more effective. In the shots that I got walking his way, I definitely noticed a lot more of a flowy type of motion than really like the kind of just jerky motion from putting your heels down. Alright, now getting into tip number two. Number two comes from Peter McKinnon. Now, in Peter's video, the one big takeaway that I got from his video was the trick he does when he's, say, leaning forward or pushing into his subject. He will basically just lean forward as much as possible right before he's about to tip over and fall, and he'll catch himself in that last second, which allows him to get some pretty smooth movement up until he catches his balance. This is something I've kind of subconsciously in the back of my head didn't really realize I was using so much, but I find it super effective, and it was one of the ways that I didn't realize I was using when I was trying to focus on Jesse's video. This one is kind of a big one for me. Again, I use it more than I even realize for a lot of my footage. Alright, now moving on to the third. Tip number three comes from AIDIN Robbins. Now, the one big takeaway that I got from AIDIN's video is keep something center in frame when you are doing a pretty drawn out or exaggerated motion, so that it kind of gives you something to really aim for while you're trying to be as still as possible. Now, this is the tip that I used in the shot that I got of my kitchen, where I was kind of moving past and I was really focusing on the sink, and I tried to keep that as center as possible in the frame, again, which gave me something to really focus on as I was walking past. The other big thing that I think that this tip specifically helps with is that digital stabilization in post. I think having something in the center of frame, or as centered as possible, really helps the editing program kind of really focus in, or kind of maybe track that one object that you're focusing on, which in the end gives you a smoother result. I don't know if that is a for sure thing. It's something that AIDIN didn't really mention. It's just kind of what makes sense to me. But this tip is one of the bigger ones that I think is huge and kind of underrated, that I think everyone should be using for their own videos. Alright, so this last tip number 4, which is kind of a bonus one. This is something that I've kind of noticed and kind of figured out on my own, just from watching kind of like behind the scenes from all these other YouTubers, and it's something that they don't really talk about. I can't recall anyone really mentioning this tip. It's just, I think, something people are doing and they're not kind of realizing just how effective it is, or really that it kind of makes sense at all, I guess. I don't even know if that makes sense. But this tip kind of utilizes something that I haven't really mentioned yet in this video. And that is higher frame rates or slow motion video. In a lot of the tutorial videos about this topic, people talk about using slow motion because it's going to get rid of the kind of the jitters from your hands, as well as some of those jerkier movements you get when you are walking. But I didn't really want to talk about that too much. Again, I wanted to kind of keep this kind of focused on what you can do with your hands and your feet, basically, to get this type of footage. And also, slow motion is kind of in some of the more expensive cameras, especially like 120, and I kind of wanted the idea behind this video to be very like budget friendly. And if some of you guys out there are shooting with very budget cameras or older cameras, you're not going to have 120 or maybe even 60 frames in your camera. But if this is something that you have at your disposal, then this tip is definitely going to help you out a lot. And that tip is using motion to hide your shakes and kind of your sway motions. And this is kind of something that's kind of hard to explain. The best way I could say it is, even if you are using, say, a gimbal in this example, and you're trying to get say you're shooting 24 frames and you're trying to shoot a shot where you're pushing in on your subject as slow as possible. Now, I feel like that when we try to be as slow as possible, that's when we really produce the most jitters, shakes, or sways in our footage. And what I mean by that is if you are using this gimbal and you're pushing in as slow as possible, you might start to realize that you're going to get this kind of sway motion, this kind of back and forth, that you can't really stay in this perfect line because you're going to kind of start to sway off a little off axis, just enough to kind of notice that motion. And depending on what you're shooting, you might notice that shift on seeing one side of your subject a little bit more than the other, and it will make it very obvious. Now, to prevent this is moving in a quicker motion, right? So using motion to hide those sways, or even if using your hands to hide the jitters in your hands. So basically what I mean is, instead of moving in as slow as possible, trying to be as still as possible with your camera, shoot in a higher frame rate like 60 or 120 and just move in quicker, not super quick. You don't want to get that motion blur, but in a quicker motion as opposed to like that slow, trying to be as slow as possible. You get what I'm trying. You get the point. So if your camera is capable of slow motion, this is something that you could be doing, especially if you are going for that kind of slower movement when your subject isn't moving and you're just trying to be as slow and as smooth as possible. But yeah, oddly enough, I haven't seen any really tutorials about anyone really talking about this tip. I think this is something that they kind of just think of as like a common sense type of thing, that, oh yeah, this is just how you get smoother footage. You just do it into faster frame rate. But no one's really actually said it out loud to really teach people. It's just something that kind of comes with the territory. But I just kind of want to really kind of get it out there and put it in you guys' head so that you guys can be using this efficiently for your guys' videos. Because for me, that's the whole point of this learning series, is just for all of us to be learning together. Alright, well, that about does it for this episode 1 of this learning series. Again, I do plan on keeping this series going and implementing a lot of different tutorials from other YouTubers out there for you guys to learn along with me. So definitely let me know down in the comments if there's some tutorials out there that you would like me to kind of break down in this series. I also do plan on doing some photo tutorials as well, not just video. Kind of due to current events, some of the ideas that I had planned for some of the photo tutorials, I need to actually get outside of my apartment. And with everything that's going on right now in the world, I won't be able to really kind of get to those ones anytime soon. But I do have some planned here that I can do in my apartment, so definitely stick around for those. And these future episodes will only be focusing on one person's tutorial instead of kind of mashing them all together like I did with this one. So if you guys did enjoy this video and got something out of it, you guys learned alongside with me, definitely hit that like button. It is much appreciated. And let me know down in the comments if there's tips out there that you think are a bigger deal than the ones that I said. This way, everyone kind of reading the feed down there will be able to learn from you guys as well, and then kind of be a little community down there that we could all be kind of giving our best tips to each other. So definitely let me know down in the comments. But with all that said, guys, I will see you guys in the next one. Later.